This is Jay Martin.
All right, welcome back. I'm here with Lynette Zang once again. Lynette, thanks so much for coming back on and making the time.
Oh, for you, Jay, always. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Okay, so we were just about to jump into some developments at your bug out house. I was like, I gotta hit record because I want my audience to come on this with me. So let's go down that road. So I said, how you doing? You're like, I'm exhausted. I'm getting a ton of work done at my bug out house right now. Let's go there first. What is your bug out house? Why do you have it? And what are you doing?
Oh, okay. Well, my bug out house is a home with lots of land. I own 41 acres in northern Arizona. I won't get more specific than that.
Yeah.
But it is very, very rugged and it is very, very remote. And because of my studies, you know, about the economy and where I'm 100 bazillion% certain the currency is, the bug out house is a place where I'm working on building a community for 40 people because it takes a village, right?
Yeah.
Of different skill sets and a whole bunch of different ages. And so what has been really challenging, we know food is the single biggest issue for people during hyperinflationary transitions that we've already begun.
Mm-hmm.
And so last year, I ordered stainless steel for hot houses, which would give me enough capacity. So I have 3 hot houses up there because we get winds of about 150 miles an hour. So this has to be substantial to be able to grow 12 months out of the year. Unfortunately, the company that I chose to go with, I should have had my PI check it out first. So
well, do you have a PI, just as an aside?
Why?
No, I said, I love that you have a PI, just as an aside. Yeah, of course you do.
Of course I do. Of course I do. And I should have called him and said, hey, check this company out first. Lesson learned for sure, because they did end up delivering all of the materials, but not putting everything together like I hired them and mostly paid them to do.
Yes, right.
So they left us in the lurch, and but now, thank God, we're able to start moving forward on that again. And we got goats.
And you got goats.
We got 15 goats. I think one passed and one didn't make it. We just got them.
Yeah.
But we have 14 goats for fire mitigation.
For fire mitigation, because they keep the brush down, or what's the deal?
Correct.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And when you have 41 acres on the top of a mountain, you know, fire is a big deal.
Especially in a dry state. Yeah, no doubt. Okay.
Exactly.
Fascinating. The goats are for fire protection, and then you can eat goats, and
we can.
There's some utility there.
These are called wethers, which are all male neutered goats. We are going to get in mating pairs for the, you know, for milk, cheese, and all of that. And
going all in. I love this.
Oh, look, I've been working in this arena since I was about 10 years old, thanks to my Uncle Al. And honest to goodness, you know, when I look back on my life, there is absolutely zero doubt that I have been groomed for this moment in time. And I'm very happy. I'm almost 68. And what that really means is that I lived through the last transition in the 70s, and I was a teenager. So I was old enough to capture what was happening, not really understanding what was happening. That is with hindsight. But having had that experience, having been a stockbroker on Black Monday, right? Yeah. I mean, that was the best day that I could have ever been a stockbroker. People now, they don't know what that was like. They haven't lived it. I mean, unfortunately, there are a lot of financial consultants that weren't even around during 2008. So having some age and being able to look back and realizing the benefit of that age and being able to help people now, I mean, that's everything. It really is. But I'm certainly that's why I'm doing the bug out location. It's because it's that important. And surprisingly, in northern Arizona, water is not as big an issue.
Interesting.
We get a lot of water up there. I'm sitting on
Yeah.
top of a fantastic aquifer. And yeah, it's food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. Those are the things that we all need to have a reasonable standard of living.
100%. Now, okay, there's so much there that I want to pull on. First of all, just a comment, my wife and I sort of daydream or strategize about, our bug out house, like our acreage, and not as it's that, it's also just an appreciation for a self-sustaining lifestyle. And we moved from a city of 4 million people to a town of 20,000 people 4 years ago. And the next move will be to somewhere more remote. But the important part, and you've touched on this, you're building a community for 40 people, because it would be so lonely to just go to the top of the mountain by yourself and know that, you've got the farm, you've got the ranch, whatever, you've got the water source. In theory, you're good, tactically speaking, but from a mental health standpoint, like it would be quite devastating. Now, you mentioned.
Well, I'm not really sure about that. I want to know the truth.
Yeah.
But, one person cannot possibly know everything and execute everything.
Yeah.
So, you have to really have a community, and you have to think about, logistically, how are you going to get there? And when are you going to, I'm using it regularly now. And will continue to. So, hey, if I never need it for that purpose, it's great for my family and I and friends and all of that. But, I'm not really a farmer, but I have farmers that have committed to wanting to be there. I don't really know how to can, I'm going to be honest, but I have people that know how to put food back.
Yeah.
So I have doctors, I have engineers, I have mechanics, I have my PI.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's all about security. So looking at the mantra and then making sure wherever you are, you could do this in the city as well, where, you have all of those different people that are like-minded, which I know is challenging. I've been working on it a long time. That's probably the biggest challenge for most people, is to find those that are like-minded, but come together in community. Community is probably the single, I know food is the biggest problem, but community is probably the single most important thing of the mantra, because you need all those different skill sets.
I agree with that 100%. Okay, now you mentioned your Uncle Al, who put you on this path way back in the day. If I remember that story correctly, it was because he introduced you to a collection of precious metal coins, like gold and silver coins. Is that the story? And
that is.
So what was the trigger point and the aha moment for you, seeing the significance of your Uncle Al's silver and gold coin collection and what it did for him and what it's done for you?
For those viewers that don't know the story, I was really close to my Uncle Al, and he was a very high-end antique dealer. And my parents and I were at his house, and he took us in the back bedroom, and he had floor safes in there. And he opened up the floor safes and he said to my parents, if anything should happen to me, Aunt Birdie, his wife, will be well taken care of for the rest of her life. So I turned around and I looked, and he had 2 tall floor safes. He probably had at least 3,000 ounces of gold in there. And this was 1964, when it was illegal to hold more than 5 ounces of gold, except in the form that he was holding it, which were the pre-33 coins that he would buy when he would go to homes to take care of it. That was not an aha moment for me. I was 10.
Yeah.
But I certainly turned around to look at what he was talking about. It wasn't until I was into my career, because I've been a banker and I've been a stockbroker as well. And, one day I was writing a blog, And I just said, if you were alive like I was in 1971, and then I went, oh my God, he just gave me the biggest gift. Part of that gift was in training, was also in how tangible assets move through a cycle, from undervaluation to fair valuation to overvaluation to fair valuation to undervaluation. And it's constant like this, right? Now, you cannot say the same thing about fiat currencies, so government debt-based currencies, or or their products, their Wall Street products. Those can and do historically go to zero. But a good tangible asset, particularly good money gold, good money silver, right? These are real tangible assets that are used across the entire, every single sector in the global economy uses gold and silver, even in food, in food, in the financial system, in electronics, in medicine, and on and on and on, jewelry, every single sector. And therefore, you have the broadest base of functionality because it works in every single sector. That's the function. And therefore, you have the broadest base of buyer. So 100% of the time you have demand, sometimes more, sometimes less. And in a true supply-demand economy, that's what has an impact on the price, or the visible price that you see. In the economy that we're in right now, which is completely financialized, which means that everything has been turned, real estate, everything has simply been turned into a financial trading asset by building those contracts, those derivative contracts on top of them. Well, guess what? When you have a central bank that gives away free money, right? And with interest rates anchored at zero and just printing trillions and quadrillions and then giving it to basically Wall Street and private corporations for free for them to go up and buy real assets or to gamble on the movement of, like your home, real estate, right? They've turned it all into a financial asset. You can sell your house like this. You can buy your house like that. That's not really the way a stable asset really works. That's just the way Wall Street works. And what we're seeing now is a complete unraveling. And what's really interesting, and this is something that I've been thinking, a lot about as I'm doing my work. I remember in the 80s when I was a new stockbroker and all the talk was about globalization. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm not so sure this is such a great idea. And we shipped all the manufacturing, well, most of it, overseas, right? Well, now we see the result of that. And we are in a phase that is de-globalization. But I really actually think when I look at the coordinated efforts of the central banks and the fact that a new central bank, an IMF report just came out on eliminating even any kind of, well, they want you to perceive that there's still a difference between the central bank, or the central bank is independent of the government. But in this next crisis, because this is so globalized, I mean, it's not just in the financial system, it's like in many sectors of the entire global economy, they're talking about eliminating that separation because the central banks are out of tools. So that's just mad money printing for governments that want to spend like crazy. And when you look at what's happening right now in the US between Jay Powell and the central banks fighting the inflation that they created by raising rates, even though they admit that they have no control over the inflation caused by the supply chain and the war between Russia and Ukraine. At the same time that you have the Fed Chair Powell raising rates to increase unemployment so that they can get price stability, workers won't ask for more money when they work. You have the government that is pumping a lot of stimulus into the economy to generate the inflation.
Yeah.
Does this make sense?
No.
So what conclusion? I mean, my conclusion is that, and looking at it even on a broader level, this is all, I can't guarantee this because I can't prove it, but this is planned. You've got schizophrenia going on between the two key drivers, and now the IMF comes out in a paper saying they don't have to be separated, that it would be, policy would have a much more effect if they weren't separated. They just want to make sure that the public doesn't realize that they're not separated. But we've seen so much synchronicity between governments, central banks, globally. You got to question when you're seeing this divergence.
Quick break, then we'll get back to the interview. In the description of this video is a link where you can subscribe to my weekly newsletter. It's free and I love writing it. This week, for example, what I wrote about was a traditional role in society that we've lost, known as the sacred clown. In historic Lakota culture, for example, and many others, there is a role known as the Hayoka, and the Hayoka's purpose was to make fun of everybody and everything all the time to prevent egos from running away or people taking themselves or their ideas too seriously. We've lost that role in society today because those people get canceled, and that's a problem. So I write about things like this. I'd love to have you join the team. It's super fun. Link in the description. Now back to the interview. Enjoy. Can I ask you if this is, as you said, you can't prove it, but you have your assumptions that this is planned. I want you to elaborate on that statement for me. What is the plan? What is the end game?
Well, the central banks gave themselves a couple big tools when they started this game of fiat money, which is the government debt-based money. They talked so much about Paul Volcker in the 70s, and he did intraday raise the Fed funds rate to 21.5, although I think on the graph it shows about 18 or 19%. That gave them a lot of ramp room to lower rates. So in this controlled economy, every time we got into the interest rates are used to, at least in theory, we're going to see it in practicality, control the rate and speed of inflation. That's really the big, huge experiment that was started back in 1913, but it ramped up in the early 70s. And then again, Paul Volcker gave the central bank huge ramp room. So every time we would go into an overheated economy, we would go into recession rather, they would drop interest rates about 5.5 to 5.75% to stimulate borrowing and spending, because there's only one way to fight inflation, and that's with deflation. And there's only one way to fight deflation, and that's with inflation, right? So we've been anchored since 2008, 2009. We've been anchored near zero. They don't have that tool anymore. We've seen the big experiment with negative rates. And now it's such a big deal that all these countries, I'm thinking the ECB has raised interest rates to zero. Okay. And that's supposed to help them. They're between a rock and a hard place. Yes. So they're at their end of interest rates. And there's also, if you look on the Federal Reserve Education Department, FRED, F-R-E-D, the purchasing power, that's how much your money will actually buy you. Well, it's pretty much officially it's still at 3 cents, but we know that we juggle these numbers. So what I'm really saying to you is the game is over, because the only thing now, and this is what negative interest rates actually did, they've already inflated away your purchasing power. Now they have to attack your principal. right? So when you know that the game is over, this is a con game, and everybody's about to realize it through loss of confidence and hyperinflation, well, what do? If you create, and looking back at those historic patterns when we've had a currency regime shift, they create so much chaos that's going around that you're looking over here, you're looking over here, you're looking up there, and they're changing everything underneath your feet over here. And you don't even realize it. Back in the 70s, and it's funny because it's usually all the same kind of issues, right? So back in the 70s, we had the women's movement. We have that now. We had the oil embargo. We have the energy issues now. We had civil rights. Well, we've had those issues now. You know, we've had high inflation. We have those issues now. Let's see, did I miss anything? War, that's a big one. We have those issues now. So there's all of this chaos, and it's about distraction. And it's about creating a big enough crisis that scares the crap out of you so that when they come in with their solution, you say, save me, Mr. Bill, save me. You just accept it. Well, they've already put in place, they did this back, I think 2019, the Fed Now accounts in this country. So that in this next crisis, and they've talked about this quite a bit, in this next crisis, instead of mailing out stimulus checks, they just push a button and everybody's got an account and here's this free money. Well, as we saw on the big test that they ran with the pandemic, right? What do people do with that money? They spend it, whether they need that money to live on or it's extra money for them, read meme stocks, read, you know, Reddit, trade, all of this, you know, that's what they do. They spend it. So when I say that they have this planned, we are entering a period where, I mean, I don't know how many black swans might descend on us at one time. These are things that you don't know. You can't say, well, what black swans do you see? There are so many, but a black swan event is an event that happens that nobody could anticipate. So I can't tell you what that could be, but the system is super fragile and it's stretched really. It's like a house of cards, and any little breath could push this whole house of cards over. And while the central banks have done studies on the interconnected nature of the financial system, so if it happens in China or it happens anywhere in the world, it can travel throughout the entire global financial system. This new report just came out with where they studied imports, exports, investments, like a whole bunch of different sectors in the global economy, and found them all to be extremely interconnected, which is part of why I say this could be a plan, because this is a global issue. The events have been globally synchronized, particularly since 2008. So when you have a decoupling of that synchronization between government and central banks, suddenly after all this time, especially when they were working hand in hand, it has to make you wonder. But did they suddenly stop talking to each other? I don't think so.
Now, let me ask you, in order for a strategy like that to be pushed forward, there would need to be appropriate incentives, right? That's what drives human behavior. And largely it's just the accumulation of power. I mean, that at a micro level in your immediate community, at a macro level with our governing bodies, we're all playing a game of power, right? Every day to a certain degree. So talk to me about the incentives. I mean, what?
Huge. I mean, the incentives are tremendous because what we're moving toward is a full surveillance economy. And that whole thing is being tested in China right now, which we know that's the most surveilled country on the planet that we know of, or that I know of anyway. You know, if you if you jaywalk, wow, they can pull that money out of your account by the time you get to the other side of the street because of all the cameras and everything and the social scores and et cetera. But that's really what the payoff is the level of control over the public and the population once we go into CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. And digital currencies are programmable money. So in the beginning, where once they figured out that you had gold and you had silver, primary currency metal, secondary currency metal, limited quantity, I hold it, I own it, it runs zero counterparty risk, right? And I love from the Bank of International Settlements, you know, gold held at home runs no political risk. So you have good money, you hold it, you own it, it becomes invisible. And the central banks, because of that broad base of demand, the central banks cannot devalue this, right? So then we go to paper money, we go to, you know, we go to currency, and they can control its purchasing power value through inflation, which was part of the plan, because they know that not one man in a million, quote unquote, understands inflation. And hey, guess what? Christine Lagarde, Jay Powell have recently admitted they don't understand inflation. Big shocker. But when you hold this, it becomes invisible. It's losing purchasing power, but it's protecting your principal. This is protecting your purchasing power, okay, and your principal. Now we go to CBDCs, which, okay, completely intangible. I mean, there's not even a semblance of tangibility, and that is programmable. So now if the central bank wants you to go out and spend, because we're consumer driven, and you decide to save, well, right now it takes 18 months for their policies to go through the system for them to know, did this work, did this not work? But once we have the CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies, you're not spending. Well, they say, not me, the IMF reports say, when we have a CBDC, there are no limits to how low we can push interest rates. So all of a sudden you've got a negative 4%, 5%, 10%, whatever that is, to make you notice that if you leave your money in the bank, you're trying to save it, it's just evaporating. It's just evaporating, right? So they're attacking your principal. You know, additionally, for governments, what they say, not me, they say they can do lifetime taxes. So my goodness, couldn't they just take your tax money, you earn money today, boom, they pull those taxes out. You have zero control and you have zero privacy because they can dictate where you spend that money, how you spend that money, how long you even have that money to spend before it, boop, goes away. And as we saw in Canada, right, with the trucker strike, that was a completely legal strike. They didn't like your politics. Boom, you were cut out of the system. You better have this. And we saw it with Russia. Russia prepared by buying, you know, a lot of gold into this so that they could get around the sanctions. And of course, you know, the whole world didn't go against Russia. And that has, you know, that has really been their safety net, their gold. So it needs to be everybody's safety net, to be honest with you, because it's out of the system, it's private, and it's real. And there's the broadest base of demand. I mean, it is pretty simple.
Now, okay, there's so much there that I want to pull on. And
Sorry, I know.
no, Beautiful. And I'm really enjoying this. So let's start. I want to go back to CBDCs. I have some questions about that in relation to reserve currencies, your thoughts on that. And you've studied currency cycles for a very long time. But before that, I agree. I hold physical gold and silver for the same reason that you just explained, which I may paraphrase as saying you have optionality, right? You have the optionality of, because most people, let's be honest, they won't. And when the offer comes out that says, hey, say we're getting to this date where we're transitioning to a central bank issued digital currency, we're going to get there. Payments Canada is on their website stating we're working on a CBDC. We have no plans to roll this out, but if and when the situation changes, we want to be ready. So we could assume, it's coming. So when that day comes, yes, we're going to make an exchange here, right? We're going to give up some privacy. The privacy thing, honestly, to me, I feel like that ship already sailed. If somebody like me who's, I have an Apple phone, I'm on Google platform, I'm a business owner, I'm on social media. And you could say, oh, you don't have to do that stuff. Great. You don't have to do that stuff, but I choose to do that stuff, right? I choose those conveniences and there's an exchange there. I give up my privacy. I'm aware of it. I've made that decision. So the additional breach of privacy that would occur with a CBDC, maybe it's a bit more, but I feel like for most of us, the keystrokes on my phone are already recorded. This whole conversation is already recorded, right? Like my search history, the files on my phone, it's gone. So, but the autonomy over my cash still exists. That's the big shift for me is I have autonomy over my wealth. And that's the exchange. That's what I would be giving up.
Well, over your wealth that is not held inside of the system.
Correct. So for those so that's why I gravitate towards physical gold and silver. I've never bought paper gold ever, but maybe go for it. But I prefer the physical. And
we could have a discussion just on that one, Jay.
No doubt. But it gives me the optionality of when that trade comes, right? I can choose. Whereas if you don't have any alternative, then the transition occurs and Bank of Canada comes out and says, look, you make this transition, but guess what? Tomorrow morning when you wake up, there's gonna be $300 in your bank account that wasn't there today. Right? 99% of people are going to take that all day long. They'll take that deal, right? Of course.
You bet they will. Of course they will.
Because you don't have the optionality of something else, right? And is that the true value?
It's free.
And it's free,
right?
Convenient. Everybody's doing it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So is that at this moment in history, at this time, is that the core reason that you see value in holding, silver coins, gold coins right now? Is that it?
That is one of the big reasons. And yes, I'm all about choices. And if you have everything in their system, they're the one with all the choices. You now have none. So originally in my strategy, I had thought, okay, well, once we get through this whole piece and we're on the other side of it, and there's a component of gold in the currency, because that's what history tells us is going to happen, because they're going to have to get confidence back again. Then I would have converted, not everything, because I have legacy gold and different kinds of gold, but I would have converted a larger chunk of my, metals into the new currency. But now, since I saw the advent of the CBDCs, no flipping way. There's no way that I would make that same choice. I will convert it as I need to spend it.
So then let me ask you,
in terms of their CBDCs.
We can stack a bit of gold and silver, and shout out to Wall Street Silver for these epic, this is the way coins, love these. You have the gold and silver in a safe, you have the bug out house in Northern Arizona. Is it enough? Are you fighting a tsunami with a bucket of water? Like what, talk to me about that. That's one question that I imagine people are asking right now is like, you're trying to fight the federal government with an acreage and some silver. Like, is that enough? Is that enough, Lynette? Let me ask you that.
Is it enough? Well, time is going to tell us whether or not that it's enough, but what it is for me, because when people get hungry and hopeless, they make a lot of choices. And as we have seen on a global basis, you have people that are now rioting. That's one thing that's happening amazingly in China, which I'm watching really carefully and closely, because people are now kind of pushing back from being suppressed, all that suppression, all that surveillance, and all of the garbage, because it's always the public that takes it. So I can't really answer that at this point. We'll have another conversation. But what I know is in my bug out location, I have food, water, energy, security, barterability. My wealth preservation is my gold and my silver. And then, and I'm building a community of like-minded people that have a bunch of different skill sets, so that while it's really nasty on the streets,
okay,
we're safe.
You've got some optionality. Back to that.
Exactly. That's what it's all about. You're 100% right, Jay. On the other side of this mess, then those are opportunities that present, because this is absolutely about wealth transfer. And sometimes at a 2% inflation rate, presuming that's real, the wealth transfers more slowly. When you're going into hyperinflation or the fast inflation that we're dealing with now, that wealth transfer happens more quickly, right? But this is what I 100% know, because it's happened over 4,800 times. So something's happened the same way over 4,800 times, and we're doing the same thing. I'm thinking we're going to probably get the same results. Maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? Maybe this time is different, but it never really seems to be. So because I have my wealth in gold, which is the primary currency metal, and what they do, that overnight reset. So, you have $1,000 in the bank. I mean, the average is about 1,000 to 1 when they do that reset, but it could be much more than that. It could be less than that. I don't know that. But when they do that, and I have this outside of the banking system, and I'm not worried if I wake up in the morning and I had $1,000 when I went to bed, now I've got $1, I have my gold to convert into the new currency, to convert into income producing assets like real estate that's up here right now. Although, we've certainly seen the top of that, but it will get undervalued, especially since it has been turned into a financial product and leveraged and leveraged and leveraged. You see a lot of construction going around. If I didn't do what I did for a living, I would be really naive and think everything must be okay. Look at all these buildings that they're building. Right?
Yeah.
But those projects have been in the works for years. The funding, this is not something that turns on a dime, but they're so leveraged. There's so many opportunities that if you hold your purchasing power, you will be able to take advantage of them. So that's another part of it. And have that wealth transfer your way.
Yeah. That speaks volumes to me, because where I find myself battling, Lynette, is like, I'm an optimist, and I'll bet all day long, on human ingenuity. And I think we're on broad strokes, at a high level, we're moving the right direction, right? On a long trend, from a long trend standpoint, and there's bumps along the road. And so for me, it's like, how do you weather the bumps, right? And that's what you just gave us. It's like, this is what this is. It's if and when those battles come, not if, when those battles come, because they've always come, they'll come again. It's just human nature, right? And they're jockeying for power as we progress as a species. And so when those battles get really intense, like, what's your bug out, right? It may come in the form of currency. It may come in the form of residence, right? It's important to have that bug out option. Okay, back to CBDCs. How do you anticipate multiple sovereign nations, China, the United States, Russia's looking at a gold-backed CBDC right now. Canada's working on whatever our brilliant leader is working on. How do you anticipate this shifting the world reserve currency status in that game when we see these CBDCs come into the forefront?
Messy. I see that really, really messy, especially, you think about the advantage that the US has had all these years to be the world reserve currency. And basically we have a much higher standard, or we've had a much higher standard of living than the rest of the world, which is one of the big advantages when you travel and you get to see how different people live. And this is, the middle class in, say, Europe is basically what the lower class, the standard of living at the lower class would be in the US. So there is no doubt, even though they talk about King Dollar and how strong the dollar is because Fed Chair Powell is raising rates and attracting people to the dollar, but that is the dollar against other currencies when all currencies are losing purchasing power.
It's relative. Yeah, always relative. Yeah.
Exactly, isn't it? So I see this being really messy and scary and a lot of starvation. Meds are something that, if you need medications, number one, we're doing medicinals. So, bees and plants and different trees and things like that to stay really healthy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what happens is on average, 80% of the population is going to end up in abject poverty. And there will be a lot of decrease in population, typically between the very young and the very old. That's where we're going to see most of the depopulation. I see us going very local for a while and bartering. That's why barterability, anything physical, gold and silver in any form is monetary at its base. Any skill sets that you have. I mean, that's also happening around the world right now in different places where, they really are doing barter to get the goods and services that they need. So that's why I say really, really messy, which is why I wanted a location. Can't even tell you how many tires we've lost. It's very remote, very, very, very hard to get to. Very hard to get to.
Well, I have to say that that's a trend, moving that direction towards a more like a sovereign mindset and a self-sustaining mindset,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
I see that left, right, and center in my community. And, that looks like a few things, but just the immediate friends that I have who have sourced out just a bit more land. They've moved to a bit more remote of an area and they're trying their green thumb out for the first time ever. Just,
Yeah.
And the amount of friends of mine who have taken up hunting in the last 5-6 years. Like I grew up hunting and, from the time when I was like 18 to 25 or 26, it was a major part of my life. And that made me a bit of an anomaly, to be honest, but no longer, right? It's going mainstream. So what's driving this, right? Like there's definitely some ingrained trends that are moving that direction, which is to say, like if we get to say the reshoring of the deglobalization that if we undo all the globalization that we've seen occur for my entire lifetime, we get back to a place of needing to be more self-reliant. And and at a macro scale, that means maybe within the borders of your country, at a micro scale within the locale of your community. And people are becoming, maybe even if they're not aware of it, more prepared for that to a degree, which is, I think, just which is just like good business. I mean,
right.
We've had some pretty like I joke all the time, but it's like, maybe as somebody who lives in the Pacific Northwest, I shouldn't anticipate ripe bananas in January. Like maybe that's not a reasonable expectation that I've developed here. Maybe mangoes on the shelf in February when there's snow outside doesn't make any sense unless you've got the hothouse going, right? And it's grown locally, but obviously they're not. And so, but we developed this this taste and expectation of like on demand everything right now, cheaper, more, right? And
have we not seen what that on demand, when it's produced far away?
Yeah.
I mean, we can see the breakdown of the supply chains, and it should not really be shocking to anybody that they're still not fixed or repaired, because we're depending upon a different geopolitical area in many cases for our goods and services. And, I mean, there are some homeless people up in that area. So I buy food and I buy like not what I would eat, but I buy the prepackaged kind of stuff, right?
Okay.
And what's been really interesting for me to do that, because it's not typically what I would buy anyway, is there might be 2 up there and I'll pull them off the shelf and there's nothing behind it. So even when the grocery store shelves make an attempt to make it look full, it's not full. And that's the whole piece with this just in time, as you pointed out. Most grocery stores have enough goods on the shelf for 3 days and maybe in the warehouse for 3 days. So they have 6 days worth of food.
Yeah.
We got a taste, right? In 2020, we got a taste. That's when I went and did my bug out house, because I put in an urban farm here when 2008 happened. I knew the system died. I mean, I knew it. So that's when I bought this much bigger property. I was living in a little 2-bedroom condo, getting ready to retire, travel, close the door, lock it. I'm on my way. And all of a sudden, all my plans changed. Like at that Lehman moment, I went, holy crap, the system just died. And that's what it did. And regardless of the fact that they printed trillions and trillions and trillions of probably quadrillions that we don't even know about, to keep things looking like it's still viable when it's no longer viable. But in April of 2020, when they had riots not too far from me, and I live in a very nice neighborhood, and not too far from my children, and they live in a very nice neighborhood. And I thought, there's the hole. There's the hole. I don't have any place to go. And that night I slept with a gun in my bed.
Whoa.
Now, right. And I said, no, not okay with me. Wow. Now, subsequently, I have also put those roller shields on my entire house.
Those are the ones like dropped in over your windows? Yeah. Interesting.
Bulletproof.
Wow.
You can't get in. So, if I do indeed have to be up at my bug out location for months or years or whatever that turns out to look like, this house will be locked up tighter than a drum. Security, so important. I can't move everything, nor do I want to try and move what I have in my home, but I do want it secure.
I want you to
I take this very seriously.
Yeah, I know you do. I find it so fascinating. Okay, now I want you to take a minute and speak to my audience who at this point in their life does not have as many resources as they would like, right, to begin this process. They're hearing what you're saying, they're agreeing with what you're telling them, they believe in your conviction, but they're living paycheck to paycheck. And they don't have anything in the safe, and they don't own their residence, so they can't leverage the equity, like all these things, right? Like, where do they start? I mean, you got to start. Marathon's one by taking step 1, step 2, right? So where do you begin?
And that's where I was going to go. Is how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So you look at your circumstance, and this is how I did it for myself too, because you got to understand, I've been working on this for a very long time. But, you take a look at your circumstance and you take the mantra: food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. And you ask yourself, where do I feel the most vulnerable? If you're living from paycheck to paycheck, that could be money, right? And so you need to accumulate real money, but there's all different ways to do it. Ideally, this is the most recognizable way. But, I would go to yard sales forever, and there would be like sterling silver, which is 92.5% pure, right? And somebody would say to me, oh, I don't want to, polish that. I'll buy it for $1. I can't tell you that is not so easy to do anymore. But if you are very limited in your finances, then you can go to like antique malls and, you can make a phone call. Who deals in silver? Hey, what do you have that's broken and dinged and, falling apart? It doesn't matter. You just care about the weight. That's all you care about, right? So you start to build that because like I said earlier, gold and silver in any form is monetary at its base. I think, is my chopstick in here? I don't know, but I even have a sterling silver set of chopsticks,
You
right?
do.
I do. I don't know where it is at the moment because I'm still a little discombobulated from what I've been doing in the house.
Yeah.
But, so it doesn't matter. So you build that wealth foundation with real money. And there are ways to do it. I mean, where's spot silver, which is a contract, right? It's like not even 19 bucks an ounce. Now you're going to have to pay a little more for that. But if you go to that antique dealer, he may or she may not really be aware
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
that, right? So there's a way to accumulate. And then you step back. So you don't, I'm not saying you fill that in 100%, but you fill it into a level of comfort. And then you go, okay, where do I feel the most vulnerable? When I bought this house has, it was built in 1929. So the back door was kind of flimsy, right? And I always felt really vulnerable because somebody could just come up and boom, kick it, and they're in my house. So when I had my gold and silver, the first thing I did was I put a security door on that door because I felt very vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
So that's how you do it. You just look at the whole mantra, and wherever you feel the most vulnerable, you do something about it so that you're not as vulnerable, and you just kind of work through all those pieces.
Yeah, that's just good process. And what you described at a high level is compartmentalization, right? Like when you're
Yes.
dealing with a
Mhm.
big problem, whether that's a business issue, family, it can feel so daunting. It's like, where do I even start? This thing is it's drowning me,
Yes.
this 800-pound gorilla on my back. And you never attack a problem that way by like swallowing it all, right?
You can't.
You pick
It's
a
not
vulnerable
possible.
spot and attack, right? One
Mhm.
little piece at a time, and that's it. And it's really valuable stuff because you're right. And surprisingly, the can always get kicked down the road farther than
course.
any of us think. And so we can obsess over the macro issues, but does this mean life will change tomorrow or in 3 years or in 5 years? You don't know, but you can start
don't.
today.
Mhm.
If you can afford, yeah, exactly. $19 spot silver. Can you afford that on a weekly basis? That's a good place to start, right?
It's a great place to start.
Yeah.
It really is. And it doesn't matter if that's the piece, it doesn't have to be perfect, especially when you're talking about silver and gold. Give me broken chains. I don't care. Give me dented candlesticks. I don't care.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? I'll buy them. You don't want them? Awesome. I'll buy them. No problem.
And
Yeah.
the hardest part to manage through a crisis is often for me, I should only speak personally, is my mental health. Like when things go real
Correct.
south, you know what I mean? And if my back's against the wall and I don't have options, I make poor decisions, right? I think shorter term, I'm more reactive, right? And I'm not putting my best foot forward. When I began to accumulate precious metals, what it did for me is give me a sense of confidence, right?
Yes.
And allowed me to slow down and be more patient in my decision making. So I got 3 super young kids. I think differently than I did 7 years ago when I had none,
Right.
and now it's like what I appreciate most is the sense of patience, confidence, and that gives me, right? And that's optionality. That's all that is knowing that if my back's against the wall, I got options, right? And having those options makes me think about the world differently.
Exactly. You said it really, really well.
Interesting.
And it is funny because people look at me now and they go, well, look at, you've done all this stuff. I mean, I can't even tell you, I'm not a gardener, but I had the gold and the silver and I bought this property and I started, my initial goal was to feed my family. So 20 people between my siblings and my children at that time, et cetera. And, but now I planted the whole thing out, but it's taken me 12 years, 12 years to get to this point.
Mm-hmm.
So the sooner you start, it's like I got to eat a mango from my mango tree this morning, and it
Amazing.
was so sweet and so wonderful. And I think we tweeted it and I said, the sooner you plant a tree, the sooner you get to eat from it. because I can't even tell you how many people would say to me, oh, but you have to wait 5 years or so long before you get, to eat it.
Yeah, you're
Well,
right.
the sooner you start, the sooner you get the food. So now
Yeah.
I've got my pecans. I planted the tree in 2013, and this year I actually have a reasonable harvest.
Yeah. It's interesting. Okay, well, as soon as you said that, it's funny how the just-in-time programming impacts all facets of our life, including wealth accumulation. I need to be rich tomorrow, right?
Yes.
When my
Of
mango
course.
arrives.
So let me
But
gamble. Let me buy this meme stock. Let me do this and let me do that. But I don't really know how to protect myself so that I get to keep my gains.
yes,
Right.
yeah,
I think that's another place where age really helps me
Mm,
because, growing up, I wanted a Super 8 camera. For those that are my age, they'll know what that is. But it was like a movie camera, right?
yeah,
That I could take movie pictures with. And I worked and I saved up my money. I believe it was $80 at that time, which was a lot of money back in the 70s.
mhm,
And that camera had so much meaning to me because I knew how hard I worked for it. And it
mm,
took me quite some time to actually be able to buy it. Now, look at this buy now, pay later. Oh
yeah,
my God. Do
yeah.
you know? I just did a report on this that in this past year, there has been a 95% increase in people using buy now, pay later for food.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
Food. Right.
It's
I mean,
wild.
can you imagine? So now you're going to the grocery store, you're buying it today, you're eating it, today, tomorrow, whenever you're eating it, it's gone.
Hmm.
And you're still paying for it for another, I don't know, 3, 4, 6 weeks.
This is hold on, for basic groceries. Is that what we're talking about?
For groceries, 64% for restaurants. So people haven't learned. They're going out to a restaurant, but yeah, for basic groceries, the buy now, pay later apps have increased in this past year 95%.
Wow.
Oh my God. And typically, I mean, people use them right across the spectrum, but typically these are people that really can't afford what they're doing anyway. Grow a garden.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, buy seeds, rinse them off 3 days later, you've got sprouting seeds, you've got, live food. And I'll bet you if they even drilled down, which I wasn't able to see, but I'll bet you there's a lot of things in there like Cheetos and sodas and
Yeah.
sugar crap and things that fog your brain and don't help you think clearly. So you're not able to make good
Well,
decisions.
there's so much there. And at first it kind of like hurts my soul to hear that, because you think about people
Oh,
who are in hardship and have to finance
yes.
their groceries. And then, then you land on the education front, right? You just touched on it there, nutrition, but that's programmed as well. If you look at what
Oh,
foods
yeah.
are eligible for food stamp, as an example, like not cooked foods, you can't go buy that rotisserie chicken with food stamps. You can buy Coke and Doritos, right? But that's how the platform functions. So how can you expect people to think differently when that's how the platform's been rolled out? That's fascinating. I have to look into that. I was unaware that you were even able to finance groceries, and that it had been growing at that rate. And I'm so curious who finances this and what's the collateral that needs to be put up in exchange for your
There's no collateral.
right? Like how?
And I mean, right. When I came across that stat and I looked into it, I was really shocked too. And I had the same reaction that you did, and I do a lot with the community in like the schools. We go in and we teach them how to garden. We put in the gardens for them. So we're trying to, there's a CFLA, which is a school for home insecure kids.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So they might be living in a car, they might be living here or there, but they're home insecure.
Mhm.
And, it was really interesting to me when we put in the garden and then we have parties. I mean, so this is something that we support this school system on a very regular, every month, actually, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Because my feeling is if these kids have something to look forward to every month, then they might be able to break out of the cycle that their families have put them in.
Yeah.
But one of the big pieces was food. And the last time that we went and we had a spring party and where they harvested the garlic and the tomatoes and the peppers and all of these things. And I'm talking to the kids and I said, oh, look at this. We can make salsa. We can do this. Do you like garlic? Do you like this? Do you like lettuce? And they looked at me like, kind of like I did not have one child not look at me like I had two heads. Garlic, I'm pretty sure you're eating garlic in some form or another. That's the job. And that's part of being, I've got the community up on the mountain that I'm working on, but that's also a big part of being a member of your community right here, now.
Love that.
It's so critically important because the kids are our future. That's our future. That's just not 68-year-old grandmas like me. It's your kids. It's my grandkids. It's kids. They are our future, and we have to show them a better way because we've been taught to think short term. But the planning that the central bankers do is not short-term planning. The planning that the governments do is not short-term planning.
Yeah.
So we think short-term, but they don't. And I'm grateful for my age. I'm very grateful for my age. I am.
Well, again, it all comes back, for me anyways, back to the importance of optionality and sovereignty, because how can you not think short term if, you are struggling paycheck to paycheck and it's like, I'm not worried. I mean, this is like, and then at a macro level, like you extrapolate that to like the energy crisis occurring in Europe. I wonder how this rolls out this winter. And, you look at the energy shortages and the cost increases of energy. Some are like up to like 10x in certain locations in Germany and the UK. People rethink their moral stance on hot war conflicts when they're trying to pay the heating bill next week, right? And so,
do you know that when I did this study, because obviously I've been studying currencies and currency life cycles, and when they were setting up this fiat money, fiat is just government-based money. They actually stated that, that if through the inflation, people would not realize it because as inflation grew, as their money lost purchasing power, and they were not keeping up with the standard, their incomes were not keeping up with the rate of inflation, they would be distracted. So they would be too busy thinking about their day-to-day existence and ignoring this over here. So you've got to understand that with governments and with central banks, it's always misdirection. They send you in this direction so that they can do their thing over here. And they state that they make it really complicated because when they do that, nobody questions them.
mm,
Problem is they make it so complicated that they can't even understand it anymore. Like Powell and Christine Lagarde. Yeah, well, we don't really understand inflation. Shocker. Call me.
Right.
I'll explain it to you. Hey, I'll wait for your call, Jay.
Yeah. Where I want to leave this then is just, there are micro steps anybody can take, and those micro steps compound over time and have a profound impact on your mental health and psychology and ability to plan further down the road. And shout out to Morgan Housel, who defines savings as the gap between your ego and your income. It's like, there's always something there, right? Savings is just whatever's between what your ego needs, what your income is. And most of us actually are inverse, right? Our ego exceeds our income. So we live in a debt-based life. But, it's an interesting line to sit on and think about.
Yeah, that is.
So look, Lynette, this has been awesome. Where can I point people to who want to hear more from you and catch up on what you're up to?
Oh, definitely. Well, for one thing, we have 2 websites. So we have the itmtrading.com, where it's all about the financial and gold and silver, and we create strategies based upon those repeatable patterns. So we're very easily accessible. We also have a new channel called Beyond Gold and Silver, which talks about the rest of the mantra, and we have YouTube channels on both of those. So BGS, or Beyond Gold and Silver, and where we talk about, every week I produce a piece on my mantra so that people can see why you need these different pieces to be secure in your life. But we try and meet people wherever they are. If this is absolutely brand new to you, we've got real basics that you can take actionable steps if you don't have a lot of money, if you have whatever budget, whatever experience we're creating a library and a resource and a community to help you wherever you are. So ITM Trading, we teach you about the life cycles and we help you create that strategy. And Beyond Gold and Silver, we help you meet the rest of those needs. And we love human contact. So 888-696-4653 is a great number to call us at and set up a time to figure out your own strategy. That's based on your goals.
Got it.
And your circumstances, what you have to work with.
And you get to talk to a real person. That's how it happens.
Oh, yeah. We love that. I mean, we're kind of old-fashioned in that way.
How novel.
This isn't just a transaction. This really is a relationship that goes through and beyond the trend cycle that we're in right now. They have a plan. You need to have a plan too.
Love that. All right. Well, thank you for coming back on, Lynette. It's awesome catching up with you, and appreciate that you let me run over time, because I could keep going forever. So thanks so much.
There's
Thanks
a lot
again.
to talk about. Thank
There
you
is.
for having me. It's been great. And I look forward to doing it again.
All right, thank you for watching this interview. Now, 3 things before I let you go. Number 1, I publish a weekly newsletter and I love writing it. I share my biggest takeaways and action items from the conversations that I have on this channel. In addition, my thoughts on current events, economic events, political events, and you can subscribe for free. Just hit the pinned comment right beneath this video, or just go to jmartin.club and you can subscribe on the website. I'd love to have you join the team. Number 2, ad revenue from this channel is donated to an organization that is super close to my heart called Zero Ceiling. Now, Zero Ceiling's mission is to end youth homelessness, and the way they do this is by giving at-risk urban youth the opportunity to relocate to beautiful wilderness areas and then provide them with supportive housing, career training, and just generally positive influences on their life. I love what they do. Check them out if you're interested. And number 3, if you prefer to listen to my content as opposed to watch it, you can find me wherever you listen to your podcasts. Just search for The Jay Martin Show. All right, thanks again.